Hey everyone, I'm Mariana, and we are once again looking back at the best films of the past decade. Today, we are finally talking about horror, which was easily my most requested video in this series next to sci-fi. If you missed my top 10 sci-fi movies of the 2010s, I will leave a link for that video in the info box below. And wow, this list was a difficult one to put together because this was an amazing decade for horror. So many terrifying gems came out in the 2010s. Every film on this top 10 is something that I've seen multiple times and am going to keep watching. They're films I own, they're films I constantly recommend, and more than half of these are my all-time favorites. So I'm pretty damn excited about all of them. Of course, I would love to know what your favorite horror films of the 2010s are, so don't forget to leave your list in the comments below, and I'm going to get started with mine. At number 10, I am getting this list going with Get Out. Jordan Peele's directorial debut turned out to be an important and fascinating horror film, but also something that is incredibly rewatchable and definitely the type of film that I appreciate more and more with every viewing. Featuring an amazing cast and a smart script, Get Out addresses racism while it also masterfully maintains tension and remains a disturbing horror film full of twists and turns. This is the type of horror film I am always looking to see more of, something that works on multiple levels and has a strong, meaningful concept behind it. Get Out kept me on edge the entire time I watched it the first time and had me picking up on so many small hints and details on my rewatches. It's an effective, suspenseful, clever, satirical, memorable horror film that I can recommend to pretty much anyone, whether they're a fan of horror films or not. Coming in at number 9 is The Devil's Candy, an extremely underrated indie horror gem that is absolutely deserving of more attention from the fans of the genre. And metal fans, if I'm being honest. The Devil's Candy combines tropes of haunted house stories with the killer on the loose type of plot and ends up being a dark, tension-filled film that feels fresh. It also has a very distinct visual style and color palette, paying a lot of attention to details, and it uses those visuals as part of the storytelling very well. I am honestly surprised this film is not mentioned more often by horror fans. It's creepy, it's atmospheric, it's very stylish, it has a good story and characters you want to root for, and there are no jump scares. You guys know I hate jump scares, and The Devil's Candy does not need jump scares to get under your skin. It has other ways to do so, and that is the kind of horror film I can get behind. For number 8, I am going with The Babadook, the Australian psychological horror film that is also a directorial debut for Jennifer Kent that slowly found a loyal following and absolutely deserves all of the praise that it gets. The Babadook is the story of a single mother struggling with the death of her husband as she's trying to raise her son, who suddenly starts seeing a monster invisible to everyone else. What sounds like a pretty basic horror premise turns out to be a dark story with a lot of depth and an absolutely brilliant lead performance by Essie Davis. This is the only film on this list that I have not really talked about on my channel all that much, which is unfortunate because it definitely deserves to be talked about. It did take me 2 viewings to fully appreciate it, even though I did think it was really good the first time around, and it creeped me out for sure. I really felt the themes when I watched it the second time, and it really had the proper impact on me. But regardless, the visual style is so fitting for this type of story. There's a weird storybook involved that is absolutely fantastic and nightmare-inducing. And did I mention it's really creepy? Because it creeped the hell out of me. At number 7, I have one of my favorite horror thrillers ever made, and that is Green Room. I went into this film knowing pretty much nothing about what I was getting myself into and ended up just sitting there and clenching my fists pretty much the entire time. Green Room has a punk rock band facing neo-Nazis in a situation that just keeps getting worse. It's also a film that uses its more graphic scenes very well, but in a way that makes sense for the story and not just to shock the audience. Plus, let's not forget about the cast. Anton Yelchin, Imogen Poots, Macon Blair, and a very menacing Patrick Stewart. I just don't think you can go wrong with this one if you are looking for an intense horror thriller experience. And it delivers from the visual standpoint because this is a great looking film. I love a good thriller with distinct visual style, and Green Room is definitely one of those because it fully explores every shade of green. Coming in at number 6 is one of the best zombie films ever made, Train to Busan. Now look, I am not big on zombies. That is one of my least favorite horror subgenres, but this film is insane and so much fun. Getting trapped with zombies on a train already sounds like a great setup for an action horror film, but in case you were wondering why couldn't they just stop and, let people get out, well, it's because the zombie apocalypse is happening everywhere and it's spreading very quickly. Combined with a memorable cast of characters and some surprisingly emotional scenes, Train to Busan is a must-watch for any horror fan and easily one of the best horror films of this decade. Tons of tension, tons of zombie action that does not get repetitive, and an actual story that will have you caring about the characters. An excellent film from South Korea that I just cannot stop recommending. At number 5, I have another foreign language film, this time from France, and I am of course talking about Raw. When was the last time you saw a layered coming-of-age story told through the perspective of cannibalism? Because that's exactly what this film is. Raw doesn't have a lot of interest in showing cannibalism as the exotic, gruesome custom it so often is in horror films. Instead, the film explores humanity and sexuality, a different kind of hunger for flesh, in a thought-provoking, emotional, and visually stunning way. It will make you wince, there is no doubt about that, but it will also surprise you with how powerful and universal the themes are that it addresses. Raw also features one of the best and most honest portrayals of a sibling's relationship I've ever seen on screen, which is easily one of the best parts about this film and one of the parts I enjoyed the most. Basically, it's a dark and powerful and surprisingly relatable story that I ended up enjoying a lot more than I could have ever expected. For number 4, I think it's time we lighten things up a little bit because this next film is equal parts hilarious and scary. And yes, of course, I am talking about The Cabin in the Woods. This is another film that took a second viewing for me to fully appreciate, but ever since then, I just cannot get enough of it. Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon managed to create something that simultaneously makes fun of those cabin-type horror films, but also is a very well-functioning horror film. I don't know how they did it, but they did it. It's funny, it's clever, it's scary, it's subversive, and the more horror films you see, the more entertaining The Cabin in the Woods gets. I think this film is brilliant, and while you do get more out of it if you're an experienced horror fan, so to speak, because there are so many Easter eggs and details and small things to pick up on, it's still so much fun, even if you're not that familiar with the genre, because it wears its horror cliches on its sleeve, and the character types are so hilariously obvious. So it will have you laughing, but then also characters die, and there is blood and gore and scary stuff, so what else do you need? Shirtless Thor? Well, that's also in there.
Hey, what is that?
What?
Here we are at the top 3, and I rearranged these 3 so many times because I just could not decide which order to put them in. They're all my favorites. They're all films that had a lasting impact on me and gave me some level of nightmares. But before I tell you what they are, don't forget to leave your favorite horror films of the decade in the comments below. I would love to know what your picks are. Also, check out the rest of my best of the decade videos. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future top 10s in the series and general top 10s, as well as a lot of other interesting movie and TV related videos I have coming up because I have some fun stuff for you guys. Back to my list though, at number 3, I have The Witch. You guys know I am a huge fan of The Witch. This entire New England folktale meets horror situation really works for me, especially when it's as atmospheric as it is in this film. This is another disturbing twist on a coming-of-age story that involves a very creepy witch, a family in crisis, and a mysterious evil goat, all of that wrapped in beautifully moody visuals and accompanied by an unnerving score. The Witch is a masterclass at building up the sense of dread and unease, and the moody slow burn absolutely pays off when the movie arrives at its culmination. I love pretty much everything about this film, and I would really like to see more horror films explore that scary side of the witch lore. This one combines it with personal conflict, religion, and a distinct aesthetic, and I cannot praise this movie enough. For number 2, I am going with another horror gem from South Korea, The Wailing. This film had me unable to fall asleep, not only because of the scare factor, but also because it kept me up doing research on the internet about customs and rituals and the mythology that The Wailing is full of. Out of everything on this list, this film definitely has the most twisted and original story. There is a police investigation, there is a mysterious sickness, there is an ominous outsider, there are rituals and twists and things left to the viewer's interpretation. It's essentially a masterfully done 2.5-hour horror mystery. It's a lot, and it looks great, and it's the type of horror film that is going to leave you thinking about it and going over things in your mind, looking for clues, looking for answers, looking for a way to interpret certain scenes. And if you're into that type of thing, you absolutely have to watch The Wailing. Not only one of the best of this decade, but also just generally one of the best horror films out there, just like this next one. Finally, at number 1, as you may have suspected because it has been missing from my list until now, Hereditary, a family drama turned nightmare from Ari Aster that has been terrifying and disturbing audiences since 2018 and has definitely gotten under my skin. Ari Aster is the horror director I'm currently the most excited about. There is something about his films, particularly Hereditary, that not only terrifies and disturbs me as I'm watching them, but also stays with me, making me second guess the people around me and double check dark corners. Plus, let's not forget about the best yet unrecognized by major awards lead actress performance of 2018, Toni Collette as Annie. Watching this film for the first time, I was a little bit worried it was overhyped for me because I heard so many people praising it as the best horror film they've seen in a long time, but I was so happy to find out that this film was everything it promised to be and more. And rewatching it after that, just like with any great film, made me appreciate it more and more. Also, even though I knew where it was going and I knew what was coming, it never lost its terrifying effect on me. As I mentioned, I think either of the films in my top 3 deserves that number 1 spot, and it kind of depends on what mood I am in that day to where I place these films in which order, but I am absolutely sure that overall Hereditary is the best horror film of the 2010s. And that's it for this list. I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. And as I mentioned, it was so difficult to put this one together because I had to leave out so many of my personal favorites, it's not even funny. I could have made a top 20 and still struggled with it. But I made up my mind, and this is the top 10 I am sticking with. As always, thank you so much to everyone for watching this video. A very special thank you to all of my patrons for supporting me, and an extra special thank you to the patrons whose names are on the screen right now. I hope all of you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, turn on notifications, follow me on social media. You guys know what to do. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye.